Great, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Looks like we have critical mass in the room now. Good morning, everybody. My name is Matthew Marquez, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm Community Relations Officer with LA Metro. Once again, we want to thank everyone for taking their time out of their busy schedules to provide their insights and feedback on the 405 comprehensive multimodal corridor plan, particularly for the South Bay Cities region. We definitely appreciate and thank you for your input on helping to shape these goals and making this plan, helping this plan successfully capture the strength and value of our collective projects so that Metro, LA County, and the corridor cities can help provide a competitive edge for future competitions for SB1 solutions for congested corridors funding and other funding opportunities. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started today. Today's workshop is being recorded, and we will be making that video available on the South Bay Cities COG YouTube channel following today's workshop. And then during the presentation portion of today's workshop, should you have any questions along with the presentation, please feel free to use the chat option to put in your comments. You can also raise your hand if you wish to voice your comment as well too, and we'll take those and monitor those throughout the presentation. If there are any phone users on the line, which I don't see any at the moment, so I think we're okay. But if there are any phone users, they can raise their hand pressing the *9 option if they wish to ask a question. With that, we're going to go ahead and kick off today's meeting with some welcoming remarks from South Bay City's COG Transportation Director, Steve Lance. Steve?
Let me make sure. Hi. First of all, thank you to the Metro team, the CMCP team, for reaching out and organizing this. It's really worthwhile when we get Metro and the subregions to cooperate and to come up with projects that would do well statewide. And Metro is so plugged in statewide to these programs that it really helps us understand what it is we need to do to have competitive projects. The SB1 program is a very vital program that we've only kind of picked at, I think, over the years. And it's time for us to get organized. And we really do appreciate the effort that Metro is giving us to have an overview of the project, an overview of the funding source, to have a sense of what the projects are that are competing well or that have a good chance of competing. And for us in particular, what the evaluation criteria should be. We're looking at these projects from the South Bay perspective. And the South Bay is fairly unique in the way that we do our work. And our priorities are different than some of the other subregions who have a more traditional highway or transit. But we have such a diverse program in the South Bay, and we want to be able to make sure that the Congested Corridors Program on the 405 covers more than just what's up on the deck. We think that there's a real opportunity here, if it's properly defined, to have the program cover the surrounding cities. Even when we did our original work, when the Measure M program was being devised, as we were doing Measure R, we always tried to find a way to make sure that there was an opportunity for not just the on-ramps and off-ramps but the approaching streets and the parallel streets to get included in this program and in those programs. So I think that this carries on that tradition of us being kind of an outlier and trying to be innovative and trying to be responsive to the cities who have maybe a different view of what mobility and sustainability is about and what congestion issues they want to address and how they want to address it. So for the group that's on from the South Bay, think about the evaluation methodology. Think about how your projects would be ranked as you submitted them. Think about things that we could suggest to Metro that collectively as a subregion we might be able to get implemented. I think that's it. If I do more than that, I'll take up more than my time, so I'll stop. Except I think that leads us into a brief introduction of the attendees. And maybe we can just go around the table or the room or the box or whatever we're in here and have each person introduce themselves, the organization they're with, and their position or their role in their cities or their organizations. So how do you want to do it? Do you want to handle this? Who wants to do this? Matthew, you want to call names?
Yeah, sure. I can definitely do that. I'll kind of go through the list as I see it. So first I see Diane.
Hi, Diane Forte, Southern California Edison Government Relations Manager. Thank you.
Thank you. David.
David Legier with South Bay City's COG, oversee the Measure R&M programs.
If you don't know him, you better meet him. He's a very important person in the South Bay. He can get stuff done.
Excellent. Miriam.
Maria Madami with LA County Public Works, Community Services Group, and City Services for South Bay and West Side cities.
Thank you. Ryan Snyder.
Ryan Snyder, Caltrans District 7, Sustainability and Innovation.
Oh, I didn't know that. Congratulations. Is that new?
It's almost a year now.
Wow, great.
Good to see you, Steve.
You too.
Alex Cho. All right, we'll get back to Alex. We have two Andrews. We'll start with Andrew Ross.
Good morning, Andrew Ross with LA County Public Works, the section head of the Transportation Planning section.
Thank you. And then we have Andrew Winje.
Hi, Andy Winge. I'm City of Redondo Beach City Engineer.
Okay. Then we have Carla.
Carla Dillon, City of Lomita Public Works Director.
Then we have Chris Pimentel. We'll skip Chris for now. And then we have, let's see, Councilmember Christian. Sorry, let me get your last name in the box. Sorry, 1 second. Where did you go? Okay, sorry, Councilmember Christian Horvath.
Yeah, hi, Christian Horvath, City of Redondo Beach.
Great, thank you so much. All right, and we have DJ Torado.
DJ Torado, City of Hawthorne Engineering Technician.
Edgar Gonzalez.
Edgar Gonzalez, District 7 Caltrans SB1 Program Manager.
Helen Sheep.
Helen from City of Manhattan Beach, Senior Civil Engineer from the Department of Public Works. Thank you.
We have, we also have Isidro Panuco, which I believe is with LA Metro, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And what department are you representing?
Sorry, I was on mute. Senior Manager, Transportation Planning. I actually oversee the Measure R and Measure M programs for the South Bay.
Great. Thank you, Isidro. Jeffrey.
Hi, this is Jeffrey Playcheck with LA County Public Works. I head up the team responsible for the county's traffic signal synchronization program.
Jimmy Shi.
Hi, this is Jimmy Shi, Caltrans Non-Shop Program Manager.
Okay. Carrie Cartwright.
Yeah, Carrie Cartwright, Director of Gizmo Port Los Angeles and Redondo Beach resident.
Kevin Kwok.
Kevin Kwok, City of Galena, Principal Civil Engineer.
Excellent. Then we have three Kim Turners, but I'm assuming it's just one. Kim Turner. Okay, we'll go now to the next person, Maggie Chung.
Hi, this is Maggie Chung from LA County Public Works in Transportation Planning under Andrew Ross.
Thank you. Then next we have Prem Kumar.
Hi, Prem Kumar, City Engineer for City of Manhattan Beach. Thank you.
Roya.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Roya Kalahati, Senior Civil Engineer Assistant, LA County Public Works under Maggie Chung.
All right, thank you. Next we have Selena.
Hi, my name is Selena Kuna. I'm with the City of Hawthorne, Assistant Engineer.
Thank you. Next we have Siu Mei.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Su Mei Tan, Caltrans District 7 Traffic Operations. I'm the Office Chief for Corridor Management South.
Okay. And next we have Stephen Green.
I'm Stephen Green. I'm the Transportation Planning Group Director with HNTV in Los Angeles.
Thank you. And then Ted.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ted Saman, the Public Works Director for the City of Redondo Beach, also the Infrastructure Working Group manager, I guess, for our group.
Chair.
Steve, love the beard.
Oh, thanks.
And then we have Zane.
Hey everybody, Council District 4 Redondo Beach, Zane Obaji.
All right, and is there anybody that may have hopped on a little bit late from the South Bay City's COG that would like to introduce themselves before we get into Metro introductions?
Hi everybody.
Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, hi everybody. This is Alex Cho, City of Longdale, Associate Engineer. Thank you.
James Lay with Torrance Transit, the infrastructure, transit operator working group representative.
I see Kim Turner also wanted to speak.
Well, Kim's with Torrance Transit, so it's probably speaking for her.
Excellent. Anyone else?
This is Leslie Scott with Beach Cities Transit, Redondo Beach.
Thank you, Leslie.
Godfrey Ofebu, City of Torrance, Deputy Transit Director.
Thank you. All right. With that, let's go ahead and kick into our Metro introductions. I believe I'm going to kick it off with Michael Cano. Michael?
Sure. Thank you, everybody. Pleasure to see everyone here, and we're very honored that you would take your time to work with us and help us shape this plan as we move forward to be competitive for funding that Steve Lance mentioned, and we'll get into that during the presentation. I'm Michael Cano. I'm the Deputy Executive Officer at Metro in the Planning Department. I oversee several divisions, including state policy and programming, which is linked to this program administered by the CTC, as well as goods movement planning and multimodal corridor highway planning. So thank you all, and we'll kick it over to Zoe Unruh.
Hi there, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Zoe Unruh, and I work with Michael Cano on multimodal corridor planning. I am the project manager for this I-405 comprehensive multimodal corridor plan. I'd like to pass it to Shelley Kwan.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Shelley Kwan. I'm a senior transportation planner at Metro, and I'll be serving as the deputy project manager for this effort and over the next few months.
Right, next, let's go ahead and kick it off to our community relations team. I'm going to kick it off to Karen.
Good morning, everyone. Karen Swift, Senior Manager in Community Relations, overseeing the outreach for this project, as well as for Sepulveda Transit Corridor and the I-405 Sepulveda Pass Express Lane. So pick me up out of the 405 corridor in a couple of years is what I like to say when I'm all done.
All right, and then I'm going to pass it to someone you're all very familiar with, Mark Dierking with our Community Relations team. Mark?
Yes, Mark Dierking, Community Relations, and I cover the South Bay for Metro.
Thank you. And then we also have our technical team with us as well, too. I'm going to kick it off to Jim Brogan. Jim?
Jim Brogan, Cambridge Systematics, part of the project team for the CMCP. And I'll ask my deputy, Sarah Steinberger, to introduce herself as well.
Everyone, Sarah Steinberger, also with Cambridge Systematics on the consulting team, working with Metro on this effort.
And then lastly, we have our outreach team as well, too. I'm going to introduce Susan DeSantis with Ariano Associates. Susan?
Thank you, Matthew. Hello, I'm Susan DeSantis, a Senior Project Manager with Ariano Associates, and we're working with Metro technical team and community relations on the stakeholder engagement. And we're pleased to see all of you here today. I'd like to turn it over to Elizabeth Rosenson, who is the Deputy Project Manager, to introduce herself. Elizabeth, you may be muted.
Sorry, I turned off my camera.
Thank you very much. We're glad to be here and so glad to see all of you this morning. Great turnout, and we are looking forward to hearing from you. Matthew, you're on mute.
Thank you. Is there anyone on the Metro side that may have been missed that would like to introduce themselves? Okay, with that, let's go ahead and kick it into our agenda. Next slide, please. All right, everyone. For this morning's agenda, we'll be providing an introduction and background into the I-405 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan. Get you guys up to date on what Metro is doing out here with this plan. And then we'll be conducting a very short poll to test your knowledge about trips along the I-405 corridor. See if some of those stats may surprise you based off some of the research our technical team has been doing. Then following that, we're going to be taking a deeper dive into the plan's evaluation framework. First, by reviewing the purpose and structure of the evaluation framework. Then we're going to kick it into discussion mode and talk about the draft goals and criteria for the framework, which will be much of the focus of where we're going to want your input this morning. So following that, we will then round out the morning with an overview on how we plan to develop improvement scenarios for this project. One note, as we get into the actual presentation and discussion, your active participation will be key to a successful workshop session. So thankfully, we know everyone's mic is working. So we encourage you to actively provide your feedback during the presentation, especially during today's discussion. At points during today's discussion, I may randomly call on some participants to provide some feedback, just so that we make sure we hear from as many voices as possible during today's workshop session. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael Cano, who is going to go over the plan overview. Michael.
Great, thank you very much. And I appreciate, again, this opportunity here. The 405 corridor study area is a behemoth. Outside of this California, Southern California, I think everyone knows the 405 to some extent for its infamy as one of the most congested corridors in the entire country. But when they think of it, they think of mainly the freeway. But here at Metro, when we deal with the Solutions for Congested Corridors Program and the purpose of this plan, we're looking beyond the freeway. We're looking at the entire corridor and how people move and how it's a series of interconnected systems, a system of systems that includes, highways and arterials, which you heard Steve mention, linking into or being affected by the 405. It includes active transportation corridors, a network of transit services, not just Metro, rail and bus, but we also have Torrance Transit and South Beach Cities Transit. We basically have a bunch of different transit providers within the entire study area you see here, which is a 3-mile cushion around the 405, the entirety of it within LA County from the beginning at the 5 freeway in the north, all the way through to the Orange County border in the south. And so it's approximately 48.5 miles. So it is quite a bit, which is why we're coming to different subregions, because we understand that the needs and the vision and the planning priorities for the South Bay cities is going to be different than the San Fernando Valley. It's going to be different than the Gateway area, et cetera. So we want to make sure that this plan captures your voice, your input, your priorities as we help put together regionally competitive projects and a planning vision that allows us to be competitive for other funding opportunities in the future. We know this congestion impacts our quality of life day in, day out. It's a result of many different travel demands that we have, whether it's connecting friends and families or people to their jobs, educational opportunities. We have universities like UCLA in the heart of this corridor. We have LAX, which is a major travel destination for people in and without the corridor. We have healthcare needs, services, recreation, entertainment. We have a tremendous opportunity coming forth in Englewood, for example, with the development of that facility, with the stadium there and the surrounding facilities that are coming online. And so we know that there's a lot happening in the 405 corridor, and we know there are connection issues. There's even supply chain issues. We have the Port of LA represented here today, and the impacts of that travel demand on the 405 and the surrounding region that impacts movement of people and goods throughout this corridor. So we have a lot to go through. We have a lot of tools we need to use to look at this in a multimodal approach. In traditional planning efforts you've seen in the past, you may have seen us focus on mode by mode by mode. How do we put in this rail corridor? How do we put in this bus route? How do we put in this highway improvement? The purpose of this plan is to bring all of those modes together and all those concepts together to try to create a vision that is integrated and interwoven so that what we put forth as priorities is linked to these different kinds of modes, but also puts together a cohesive narrative for how we can invest in the South Bay and along the I-405 corridor when we go for state or federal funding to explain how these different kinds of modes work together and provide the greatest congestion relief, mobility enhancements, and other kinds of values for South Bay and the I-405. So we'll go on to the, well, before we go on to the next slide, I just wanted to make sure, point out the factoids on the left-hand side of this chart here. We have about a quarter of the county's population, but more than a quarter of the jobs and more than a quarter of the county lane miles. But beyond that, in terms of the trips generated in the county, we have 41%. So you can see that the outsized impact of travel demand within the corridor beyond just simple population or lane miles. Next slide. Okay, thank you. This is just a general overview of metro planning. You may have seen this before in our long-range planning effort. Our planning efforts are becoming more holistic. They're including not just opportunities for better transit and less congestion, but including new modes, complete streets, active transportation, and also access to opportunities, thinking through how our investment in transportation leads to improving disparities or providing more access to jobs or more kinds of recreational or healthcare access that people are demanding through transportation. Transportation is a means to an end. So this is how we are approaching our view here. We have a very clear statement on how we're focused on eliminating racial and socioeconomic disparities and being sustainable. And I think this is carrying through, and this is the vision that is set forth by Metro and is being promulgated by our CEO, Stephanie Wiggins, as we look forward to making our planning tools more effective and more responsive to the needs of all of our communities and subregions. Next slide. So why a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan? You've heard about the Solutions for Congested Corridors Program that is administered by the CTC. It is a program that offers $250 million per year from SB1's gas tax revenues that has a very strict set of qualifying criteria and application processes to ensure that the state is investing in not just relieving congestion in the most impacted corridors in the state, but also investing in multimodal solutions to address it beyond just simple highway improvements. Highway improvements can be part of it, but in limited circumstances and connected to the multimodal framework. So we have $250 million per year we can compete for. To compete for this program, you need a qualifying comprehensive multimodal corridor plan. So without this plan adopted and approved by a board and meeting the criteria of the CTC, we cannot submit projects along the 405 corridor to compete for those funds. So when it boils down to it, that is the essential need of this plan. But we're going beyond just what's qualifying, what's the minimum criteria. We're trying to stay ahead of that curve because you've seen in the policy environment of the state, we have new regulations, new executive orders, new plans coming forward every month to help clarify and advance ideas of equity and sustainability and multimodalism. And here at Metro, we like to see ourselves ahead of that curve and leading that conversation, and not just in the region, but at the state and with our partners. So in order to be successful for the coming cycles and the cycles in the future for the 405 corridor projects that may emerge from this plan, we need to make sure that we go above and beyond that minimal, that minimum, and go and provide a holistic planning vision that allows us to compete and be able to have that conversation going forward. So hopefully that is an overview of what we're doing. Not every project that comes out of this planning effort is going to be a perfect candidate for this particular program, but we do believe that if we can make our projects be competitive or at least be responsive to this program, then we can compete for other programs that become available, from federal discretionary programs to state discretionary programs that may be more aligned with certain projects in terms of their competitiveness. So that's our plan, that's our hope. And I believe I'm going to be turning it over pretty soon to my team here.
Yes, I will take it from here. Thank you, Michael. So next we're gonna do a little mini poll, if you will, to test your knowledge on the 405 corridor and how trips are handled through the corridor. So I'm gonna ask Stevie or Jennifer to go ahead and launch the poll. It's just a quick 3-question poll. First question is, what percentage of counties' daily trips occur in the corridor? Is it 36%, 41%, or 44%? The second question asks, what percentage of trips are considered regular or commute trips? Is it 18%, 24%, or 28%? And then lastly, a true or false question. Senate Bill 1 refers to the I-405 in LA County as one of the state's most highly congested, highly traveled corridors. Is that true or false? So we'll give everyone a couple of minutes to, about a minute to respond. And then Stevie and Jennifer, if you want to let me know when we're ready to go, I will, you can go ahead and show the results. Give everyone a minute.
There's also another retaining wall situation along.
Okay, we're just about a minute, but we can give it a few more seconds for the last people to participate. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll right now.
Excellent. So looking at, if we want to go ahead and share the results, there we go. They're on the screen now. I'm seeing our answers, and some of these answers may surprise you. So for the first question, what percentage of the county's daily trips occur in the corridor? Most of you replied with 41%, which is the correct answer. So 41% of daily trips are handled on the corridor daily. So great, most of you guys got that one. Question 2, what percentage of trips are considered regular or commute trips? So 46% of you replied 28%. Surprisingly, it's actually on the lower end. So only 18% are considered regular or commute trips. So implying that, there's other types of trips being made along the corridor here. So it looks like that surprised many of you. And then lastly, true or false? This is hopefully an easy question. Senate Bill 1 references the I-405 as one of the state's most highly congested, highly traveled corridors. And of course, we know by experiencing it, it's very true. So yes, the answer is true to that. Thank you all for that, for entertaining us with that short poll. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Zoe, who is going to continue our presentation. Zoe.
Great, thank you, Matthew. So, I think so far we really have talked a lot about why we're taking on this plan, what is guiding this plan. And I just wanted to cover really at a high level, what is the plan trying to do? What are the elements of the plan that we hope to deliver? So number one, we want to understand and communicate the corridor conditions and needs. And you can really help us do that by sharing what are the South Bay's biggest challenges. Number two, we want to create a comprehensive corridor vision. As Michael said, one that really includes all different modes and is responsive to the vast travel needs. And number three, we are evaluating projects because we want to be primed for these opportunities, SCCP firstly, but these other funding opportunities as well. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. So we're looking forward to your input and guidance as we look to do that effectively. And then lastly, we are looking to organize projects into logical improvement scenarios that can help us demonstrate a multimodal corridor strategy. So I want to start shifting gears because we want to get into our evaluation framework discussion. So if we can go to the next slide. We're going to provide today a little bit of the overview of the structure and then talk to you about the elements and get your feedback on how to make this framework really most effective for this plan. So at this time, I'd like to hand it to Jim from Cambridge.
Thanks, Zoe. Hi, everybody. just want to add my thanks for your time and input here today. Hugely helpful for us as we start digging into the details of this plan and what it's going to look like. Before we get too deep into it, I do want to take a step back and explain why we're even talking about an evaluation process. First of all, as you see here, it's a required element of a CMCP, so that is always a good place to start. It makes our job a little easier, obviously. But in addition to that, evaluation framework really is an important part of the process because it helps us stitch together our vision for the corridor with our technical analysis findings, helps to identify the types of projects and strategies and initiatives that help us make progress toward our collective goals, and it provides an opportunity to really evaluate solutions, projects, and programs with a common set of criteria. So we're going to switch it over, I believe, to another platform here. So we could shift over to that so we can explain this process and start getting your feedback on this. So as you can see, we've given some thought to what this framework needs to look like. And it really consists of three main elements, as you can see on the slide here. I always like to start with the end in mind. So on the right-hand side, we're trying to land on improvement scenarios. So these are essentially groups of projects and programs that help us make progress toward our goals. So that's where we're trying to land. To get there, we start on the left-hand side. We have to start with an accurate, up-to-date list of potential projects, strategies, programs, initiatives. Really, what is the universe of projects that we're thinking about? COG staff has already worked with Metro to collect your most up-to-date list for the South Bay, so I want to say thanks to the staff for that. We're obviously appreciative. And it allows us to really spend time on elements 2 and 3, which really are the heart of the evaluation process. So the second bubble there, once we've got the universe of projects along the corridor, we evaluate how each individual project or program contributes to our overall goals for the corridor. So this is obviously a critical step as it helps us better understand the types of projects that might help us address our most important challenges and our most important priorities. And then thirdly, we want to land at improvement scenarios. These are packages we package these things together to help inform future decision making. I want to make it clear, and I will continue to make it clear throughout the rest of the project. This is not a prioritization of projects. It's really just a preliminary screening to help inform and support future decision making. So we're going to dig into each of these elements, or at least elements 2 and 3 over the next several minutes, really focusing on getting feedback on the questions that are at the bottom of the slide. Do these proposed goals align with your strategies? And we'll walk through those. And does the improvement process that we're beginning, or the evaluation process, and how we come to improvement scenarios, as we start thinking about how to put that together, is our initial thinking on track? And where have we missed the mark? Where have we hit the mark? Next slide, please. So I want to start with the goals. I'll walk through these really quickly, and then I'll turn it over to Matthew to start thinking about what these really mean to you. We start with the goals because these are really the foundational elements of the evaluation process. Really important to get these right, because everything that follows, the performance measures that we decide to use, how we evaluate projects, how we package them all of those together, all of those start with a really solid set of shared goals. So the goals you see on the screen were developed specifically for this plan, but obviously they didn't get plucked out of thin air. They've been informed by things like Metro's LRTP, Vision 2028, various strategic plans that Metro has done over the last several years, the statewide LRTP, the California Transportation Plan 2050, and the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, or CAPTI, which is recently released and is the statewide plan to curb transportation-related GHG emissions. So hopefully you'll see some common themes around mobility, equity, sustainability. All of that is intentional, as we clearly want to be aligned with existing statewide and regional goals and guidance. So I'm going to turn it over to Matthew, who's going to work us through an exercise to get your thoughts on are we on point with these goals or not? Matthew?
Excellent, thank you, Jim. So now we're going to move into our first discussion exercise here, which is focused, as Jim mentioned, on our plan's goals, right? So looking at improving mobility and accessibility, advancing equity, supporting economic vitality, achieving sustainability, and enhancing safety. So right now we're using the Mira board application, which is a collaborative whiteboard tool, which would replace your typical large Post-it notes that we would have in our workshop room here. That's going to help us collect our collective feedback on the plan based off of your guys' feedback today. So for our first discussion, we're, as I mentioned, focusing on the plan's goals. We want you to tell us how these goals resonate with you, with your own goals and priorities for the South Bay Cities region. Are there any goals that we may be missing in this plan that we may need to include? And then we also want to know, what do these goals mean to you? So when looking at mobility and accessibility, equity, sustainability and safety, what do those particular elements, goals mean to you? What's a definition that you may have? Or also discuss, what challenges, issues, or solutions you may have within your own region regarding these particular issues. And so those are the first set of questions that we want to ask for you today to help facilitate our discussion. And so as we get your feedback, we're going to be adding, you'll see little post-its on the left-hand side that our team is going to put on the board as we get more feedback. So let's go ahead and begin our discussion. So I'm going to ask if you have something that you'd like to add to the Mira board based off of our conversation. Go ahead and either raise your hand if you want to say it out loud. If you'd like, you can also put it in the chat for us, but we prefer oral discussion. We welcome anybody to go ahead and start raising their hand and kick off our discussion this morning. All right. All right, let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and start calling on a couple of people. So maybe Steve, maybe you want to kick us off on today's discussion. I guess sort of what's your initial thoughts on our goals here? Does anything particularly resonate with you? What are your thoughts on this?
My first question is, with a 41-mile corridor across several subregions, how do you coordinate things like equity, where there are some pockets that are much more needful than other pockets? How do you deal with equity on a subregional basis? Because it's so different in the different subregions.
Yeah, thank you. Zoe, do you want to maybe elaborate a little bit on sort of Metro's EFCs and sort of how we go about defining where we prioritize equity?
Yeah, so Metro has an equity-focused communities definition that looks at equity from a couple of different perspectives, and also there are equity considerations and guidance we have from the state through the disadvantaged communities lens, and they consider some different factors. But Metro's definition looks at race, income, and access to a vehicle. And we definitely acknowledge that this is a very diverse corridor, and that's why we're really having these conversations with the cities, with the subregions, because we know those needs are unique and different. But we also, in this planning effort, have been thinking about users as well, and who the users are accessing the corridor from outside those communities, and what is the dependency from equity-focused communities. So we're taking a lot of different angles to this lens, and know it's a very important corridor as far as equity goes on a number of different levels. So I think that answers the question, and part of this discussion here around these goals is to recognize what are the specific equity related challenges in your communities. To have it at that level, because we realize at the scale of the corridor, it's going to be very different. And we need to acknowledge the realities across the corridor. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. The same kind of a question, though, applies to improving mobility and accessibility. We have typically a bottoms-up process in the South Bay, where local jurisdictions recommend the projects that they want to do in their jurisdiction. Is there any advantage or evaluative weight given to multi-jurisdictional projects?
So I can answer that, and I don't know if Michael wants to chime in. I mean, certainly, I think part of this effort, as we said, is really guided by Solutions for Congested Corridors, which I think puts a lot of emphasis on kind of multi-jurisdictional and sub-regional, regional sort of impacts. But as we've dived in a little bit to looking at the needs of the corridor, we know that they vary greatly. There are localized needs, and then there are regional needs. Those 18% of commute trips that we shared, of regular commute trips, are really, really long trips. But similarly, there are a lot of trips happening on the corridor. They're very short. So we know that there's no one size fits all in terms of improvements. And we're going to get into thinking about kind of how we then evaluate using criteria to evaluate these goals. And Jim, I don't know if you want to chime in and have some thoughts on this, but I think the intention of the plan is to look at all of the needs, knowing that not everything's going to be SCCP focused, but the mobility needs of the corridor are not all SCCP ideal candidates. They are varied. And I don't know if people want to add something.
Jim?
Yeah, sorry, I thought she was calling on Michael. I think Steve brings up a great point. This is exactly what I think we're trying to get after is, yes, 49-mile corridor, huge, how do we kind of characterize these goals in a way that makes sense in each place, recognizing that each subregion has a different view of each of these things. So I'd be curious to hear, Steve, from you or some of your member cities and member agencies. What does advancing equity mean in the South Bay? How do you consider that? How do you frame that issue? And same with, and clearly, I mean, you talked about it at the beginning a little bit, South Bay's got a little bit of different view about mobility, accessibility, sustainability than some other parts of the corridor. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you view those. But what does that mean to you? How do you, when we say those words, what does that mean to you in your neck of the woods?
So I'm going to defer to my cities because we're a bottoms up kind of an organization. That's cheating, but that's what I'm going to do.
That's right. No, that's a good move. That's what we want. Right?
And Ted, why don't you, Ted and Kim, I think would be the two if Kim's on or her surrogate.
Christian's got his hand up if we want to go with him.
Oh, sure. Let's start with Christian. Yeah.
Well, I want to gain a little bit of clarity, Jim and Zoe. So when we talk about the corridor, are we talking about the corridor and then a mile diameter around that corridor?
The 3 mile buffer. So if
3 mile buffer.
Yeah, so that map, I don't know if we can pull it back up on the screen. The map that we showed at the very beginning. Yes, 3 mile buffer around the corridor. Yep.
Okay, and so clearly from the South Bay area, like we with Measure R and now Measure M funds, we've been trying to think about that and think about it within the context of, especially from Measure R, right, improving flow on the arterials, so that you can take congestion off the freeway. And now we are trying to do more with Measure M in our South Bay fiber network in terms of trying to effectuate signal synchronization, that is sub-regional. So we're, as a COG, we're thinking about things in the broader picture. But I have to be honest, when Steve talks about us, our process is bottom up, right? It's each jurisdiction coming in with a project. But sometimes I think we need a kind of a 30,000 foot view. And this is not a slight to the team from Metro that's on this call, but the South Bay kind of sometimes we feel like, especially from an equity perspective, is thought about later. So, from a transit perspective, you guys have removed transit options in certain areas of the South Bay, most likely I would assume because ridership is lower in those areas. And so there seems to be like a cutoff line at Rosecrans. There is some Metro buses that do go below that demarcation, but the simple fact of the matter is we're never going to get congestion on the freeway to improve just by doing, capital improvement projects that cost billions of dollars, right? We have to invest in the arterials and the communities surrounding them that are using it both as a commute and or a connector, as you mentioned, for those short trips. And we need to give people other options, transit options. And I don't mean just rail and bus. We need, from Steve's perspective, as he brought up mobility, micro mobility, bike lanes, protected lanes. I am of the mind that if we build it, the people will use it. But, just doing class 2 or class 3 lanes, that doesn't enhance safety, right? So when we think about these 5 buckets you have here, there needs to be an intersection of how does the goal or the strategy cross over each of these in a way that will have that will create a greater demand for users to actually make a choice to not get in their car and get on the freeway, right? It's the same reason why we try to advocate for, say, from a transit perspective, we've been advocating that the Green Line should automatically connect with a 1-seat ride to the Crenshaw line, right? Because most of our commuters are going where? North. They're not going to Norwalk, And if they do go to Norwalk, what are they doing? They're switching off on the silver or the blue line to still go north, right? So, so I'm sorry that I'm rambling a bit here, but really, if we want to improve mobility and accessibility, and we want to get less congestion, we do need to focus on the other alternative options on the arterials and or collectors throughout the South Bay that'll give people a safe option to not necessarily get in their car and commute especially within the South Bay itself. I recognize that might not be possible if we're trying to get people up to the west side, Culver City or downtown, but that'd be my first thought.
Great, thank you so much, Councilmember. We appreciate that feedback. Zane, I see that you have your hand up.
Thanks. So piggybacking on what Councilmember Horvath just said, we talked about this briefly in our council meeting last week because we're building a new transit corridor. And if we want to have improve mobility and advance equity, enhance safety, I think we got to get also serious, not just about bike lanes, but protection of bikes. The story I told in my city was I used the Metro Expo line at Westwood for a while, about 6 months while my house was being built. And I had one bike get stolen, and I bought a super cheap bike, and I parked it there, and it got stolen too. I thought, no way somebody's going to steal this $100 bike that I bought off Facebook. But and I don't think a guard is adequate, because there was a guard there actually, and presumably guards got to take breaks under California law. So we need to get serious, like the way Europe gets serious about lockers for bikes, a station where you check a bike in, valet out. It's well worth it for the number of cars we can get off. So that's one thing. More locally, I think, to go in super micro, if you look at the Englewood on-ramp to the 405, it's a three lane wide street, and it's got no lane lines, I should say. So it's kind of like a street in Mumbai, if you know that area, and there are accidents there all the time. Personally, the only accident I've ever been on in the last 10 years is right there, because everybody's rushing to get on the 405 and merging to the right, but there are no lines. So those are some of my thoughts, but I'd say get serious about bike safety, including the protection of bikes when people have to leave them behind. That's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Zane. Let's hear more from the audience. Are there any other cities that want to chime in and maybe let us know what sustainability means for your city? Let's go ahead and take on that topic. So, what do we think about sustainability? Any thoughts, goals that maybe your city is working towards that we should be mindful of? Chris, you might go ahead.
Yeah, I'll echo a bit more of the South Bay. This is Chris Pimentel from El Segundo commentary that sustainability ties into using these other multimodal transits. And as both a bike rider and green line, silver line, blue line rider, the fact that those trips are excruciatingly miserable and made miserable by the unpalatable and unsafe experience you have on them. You know, I certainly take them, but I wouldn't send my wife. That is a huge deterrent effect for people in the South Bay using them. We oversubscribe, I would argue, Commuter Express, but undersubscribe any of the parallel tracks. There is an appetite, you know, and I will echo Christian's argument on if you build it, they will come. If you have something that is palatable and safe and willing to ride, people are clearly able to use it because you can just take a look at Commuter Express and see how full it is all the time. But the other pieces are such a, you know, you put your bike at risk every time, as the previous caller noted. And depending on what time you are riding on the other ones, you know, if you get on the blue, that is a really, those guards are not peace officers. No, they don't have the power of arrest. So if you're at Willowbrook when the sheriff isn't there or LAPD isn't there, depending on who has the contract, that can be a dynamic situation. So I would argue that the sustainability piece and getting people off of single-use commutes is tied into how effectively we are able to make the other uses workable. And while we can spend billions of dollars on highway improvements, if we want cars off the road, making the other pieces actually usable is got to be a priority. And $1 billion could go a long way to securing those assets.
Yeah, and let me piggyback off of something Chris mentioned there. The Commuter Express is fairly limited, and therefore not many people are even aware of it, and so they don't take use of it. Why? Because it has limited times where you can catch it down here, and then where you can catch it wherever the point of destination may be, right? And then same coming back, right? There's not a lot of flexibility for users if they need to get in early or work late. And you know, to be honest with you, we have colleagues here in the South Bay that do use that to go downtown, and they seem to like it. But it creates an issue when their schedule changes, and then what do? They have to get in their car, right? And so I think from a user perspective, most people default to the car whenever there is a challenge presented, or to Chris's point, whenever there is a concern of safety or ease or comfort, right? They're just gonna go right back to the automatic default, which is their vehicle, and they're typically one person in a vehicle. And then from a sustainability standpoint, if sustainability in this bucket here is meant to address environmental sustainability, then we're missing the boat, right? If sustainability here is meant to address a variety of factors that should be sustainable in creating a long-term transportation plan, then we should also define that as well.
Excellent. So let's go ahead and pivot into our next conversation as well too. And this may also provide some more insights that we'll go back to with the goals here. So next, let's go ahead and move into our evaluation criteria. Jim, can you go ahead and do a little bit of an overview on the evaluation criteria for us?
Sure. So, and thank you for all that input. Actually, a lot of the input we just got, I think, maps over pretty well to criteria. But there's a lot of common touch points here, so this is fantastic for us so far. So keep it up, please. So the next step in the evaluation process is to attach specific performance criteria to each of the goals, right? So the criteria are just ways we measure how an individual project or program contributes to each of the goals. And again, as we start to develop the criteria, I like to keep the end goal in mind. As Zoe mentioned earlier, one of the critical outcomes of this plan is to identify projects for consideration in the SB1 SCCP program. The CTC guidelines are pretty clear for SCCP funding. They're pretty clear about criteria that will be considered, things like reducing VMT, improving throughput, reducing delay, et cetera. These are listed in the middle column in your screen here. And these are things that we're definitely going to be moving forward with in terms of how we start to evaluate projects. But that's not the only thing we're going to think about. So we've given some initial thought to criteria based on the results of our technical analysis. We want to hear from you, obviously. On the technical analysis side, we did find that the majority of the trips in the study area, about 60% of the trips, about 6 million total, are less than 5 miles. Fewer than 6% of those trips are using transit or active transportation. due in fact to a lot of the issues that you just brought up, I'm sure. So we're considering adding a criterion dedicated to that. Getting on the equity question, we found a significant percentage of trips coming into the corridor. This is corridor wide. A significant percentage of those trips coming into the corridor, about 40% of them are originating in the Metro defined equity focused communities, or EFCs. So we wanted to focus some criteria on those communities specifically. So you see some of those ideas just kind of sprinkled on the right-hand side, really just to start to prime your thinking on these. And so I'll turn it over to Matthew. And I think, again, building on the discussion we just had, if we can think about what are the elements of projects that make them more attractive, make them more usable, make them options to highway travel or single occupancy vehicle travel. If we can turn those into criteria and think about it that way, I think that'd be hugely helpful. So I'm gonna turn it over to Matthew to kind of walk you through this part of the exercise as well.
Yeah, so as Jim mentioned, the Solutions for Congested Corridors Plan criteria is the minimum. So the second column that you're seeing here, you'll see the first column is our goals. The second goal is our required criteria for the program. And this is what we consider our floor, right, to start with. But we're looking to find additional criteria that will enhance our plan further and better assess and illustrate how things like equity, accessibility, sustainability, safety, as we mentioned, that was an important one that came out a couple times in our earlier discussion, are being considered. So with that, the question that we ask for this section is, what other criteria should we be pulling into our evaluation process? So just a couple of examples. So we thought it would make sense relative to the goal of sustainability to add in reducing criteria pollutants and greenhouse gases. And that would be thinking about other climate factors like projects that address things like heat islands, sea level rise, and extreme weather. So, finding ways to add additional criteria, right? And so that was in our achieve sustainability. So addressing heat islands, sea level rise, and extreme weather was an additional criteria that we're considering to add. So as we go through each one, we can review the required SCCP criteria. Maybe we'll start with the first two sections since this board is a little bit bigger. But for improving mobility and accessibility, we have a number of required criteria. So first things first, we have to minimize vehicle miles traveled, improve person throughput, reduce VHD, which hopefully Zoe, maybe you can clarify what VHD is for me. Sorry, I don't know the acronym offhand.
Vehicle hours of delay.
Perfect, thank you. Increase travel time reliability and transit on-time performance, encourage mode shift, and support transportation efficient land use principles. Then one other criteria for consideration is supporting the use of non-auto modes for short trips. And so those are the considerations for criteria there. Then with leading with equity, there's one required criteria, which is expanding access to jobs, service, recreation, and education, particularly in our EFCs, our equity-focused communities. And one additional criteria being considered is improving air quality, health indicators in an EFC or disadvantaged community. So let's open up the discussion again. And our cities are, we have some of our transit providers here as well too. What other criteria should we be considering for improving mobility and accessibility and also leading with equity? I know we had a lot of thoughts earlier about leading with equity. So Steve, go ahead.
Excuse me, I think there's a missing piece, and I don't know whether it's eligible under SB1, but we've been focusing in the South Bay on the trip not taken. The idea is that it absolutely eliminates VMT and it absolutely reduces GHG if you can do business online, if you can take care of your business without having to make a trip. And I think it's a missing piece in much of what Metro does. I think the trip not taken or the use of the South Bay Fiber Network and applications that we're developing makes perfect sense in the South Bay. How do we find a way to not take the trip? And I think it should be added under mobility and some of the other factors as well. It also improves equity if we can find neighborhood places where people can access computers and get their work done without having to travel either on transit or in their car or on a bike.
Excellent. Yeah, those are great points. Excellent. I also saw, sorry, there's also been some movement in the chat as well too. I'm just making sure, looks like it's mostly in regards to the previous section, but thank you, Steve, for also putting your comment in the chat as well too. I see that Ted has his hand up. Ted, go for it.
I do. Good morning, Matthew, and everybody again. You know, I think one of the things that we've got to look at for the 405 corridor is that it is not a standard highway that runs in parallel to any of our arterial roadway networks. It is a diagonal that cuts through a multitude of both north-south and east-west corridors. So really, this is applicable to both this section and the prior section. If we want to improve mobility and accessibility, we've got to truly look at the alternate routes that may be utilized. Englewood Avenue is one that was mentioned earlier. In the city of Redondo Beach, it does intersect the 405 freeway at the north end of the city. But as you go further to the north, the 405 veers considerably towards the west and therefore may exceed that 3-mile radius that you were looking at before. And that's just one example where I think the alternate route corridors should actually be investigated even outside of that initial radius, because they are the true alternates that should be considered. And you know, again, when we look at those alternate routes, obviously we're not looking at just vehicular automobile counts. We're looking at truck traffic that is distributing and or delivering goods and materials. We're looking at alternate modes of transportation, as you mentioned, trying to shift those modes from being auto-centric to becoming transit-oriented or users of bicycles and so on and so forth. So I think those are elements that should be looked at, and actually they tie in very closely with a lot of the other goals and objectives that you have for today.
Excellent, great feedback. And I saw we had some clapping hands to your statement. So looks like some of our colleagues are in agreement here. Excellent. Let's see, checking the chat, no additional chat here. Zane, go ahead.
This may sound pretty dumb, but I feel like from leading with equity, planting shade casting trees near the freeways and in that zone would really help out a lot. If you drive down, I realize it's the 110, we're not talking about the 110, but if you drive down the 110 as you go through South Central in that area, all you see is palm trees, and those aren't doing anything for those communities. It would be great if we had big trees, especially here, for example, in Redondo Beach, where the 405 cuts between Englewood and Manhattan Beach Boulevard. That corner just got a housing overlay due to the state's RENA requirements. So if housing comes in there, we need to have, and communities, especially impoverished communities, need to have insulation from the maleffects of being near a freeway, as well as obviously whatever cleansing properties the trees, big, mature, nice trees could provide to communities. So my thoughts there.
Excellent. And maybe this comment also extends the sustainability goal as well too. I can see some parallel or some overlap there. Excellent.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. If one of the concerns that you guys as a team are expressing are the eradication of heat islands, then clearly within the 3-mile radius on any corridor, you know, you are going to want some type of leafy trees that can create shade and prevent heat islands on the surface. So, and that is something that you can do in coordination with local jurisdictions, but it should be considered.
Along with the trees, you can change the surfacing of the street itself to reduce the absorption of heat. So using the proper materials to resurface streets to decrease reflection and reduce the heat on the street itself is important.
Great point, Steve. Excellent. Apologies, I was on mute earlier and was chatting away. For the first goal, improving mobility, David Mock wrote in the chat. So encourage transit through toll express bus lanes. So another great thing to add on there. Thank you, David. All right, let's keep the conversation going. Maybe we can review the next two goal areas as well too. Just review those. So for supporting, excuse me, economic vitality, the required SCCP criteria is to create and retain jobs, create connections to jobs and as well as major destinations. And then the additional criteria we're considering for that is improving regional competitiveness, and then integrating sustainable low carbon freight strategies. And so those are the additional criteria there. And then for achieving sustainability, we have balanced transportation, environment, and community. And then reducing greenhouse gases and criteria pollutants, as I had mentioned earlier. And then we had the first goal, which is addressing, additional goal, which is addressing heat islands, sea level rise, and extreme weather events. And then, so Zoe and Jim, Steve had a question in the chat about, can the existing guidelines be changed? Do you want to clarify?
So the CTC with each cycle has guidelines workshops where the guidelines get refined and further honed. Certainly, we're anticipating that the climate action plan for transportation infrastructure is going to play a big role on shaping this latest round of solutions for congested corridors guidelines. So yes, they get updated with each cycle.
Good.
Great, and we have a couple of things coming in the chat right now. Please feel free to raise your hand while I'm reading these out as well too, if you want to go ahead and add in. Zane wrote, invest in development within the underserved communities so that they can get the goods, services they need with the communities within their communities without getting on the freeway. So reducing those freeway trips. Great, thank you. And then Andrew Winje wrote, has any work been done to study the ratio of 405 users passing through the South Bay versus those beginning or ending in the South Bay? Do bypass lanes make sense if the ratio is heavily biased to the former? Maybe Jim, you may have some insights. Zoe, you may have some insights on that.
So, I mean, that's a good question. We do have that data. We have through our analysis, we have a good sense of who's traveling the corridor, right? And the kind of times of day they're traveling and the length of the trips and all of that, and where they're starting and where they're ending their trips. We did not cut the data by COG region, but we certainly can. That's relatively straightforward to do. So yeah, if that's helpful, that's something we can probably do. We have the ability to do that. We have the data to do it. It's just not a geographic slice necessarily that we took in our initial work, if that makes sense.
Okay, and thank you, Jim, for that. And Councilmember Horwath, go ahead. You have another comment.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate. So Steve and I have both brought up the South Bay Fiber Network, which Metro is a part of, all right, and connected to, as is LA County Public Works and whatnot. And I want to say we talked about it up in improved mobility and accessibility, but truthfully, right, it really casts a shadow over all of these. Okay, it does. It is a program that leads with equity. So if Metro is doing projects and laying conduit and creating an ability for people to have access to that, whether that's at metro stations or other areas in conjunction with the local jurisdiction or multi-jurisdiction, important. It supports an economic vitality. When we go back to that trip not taken that Steve was talking about, right? Bringing in that high-speed gigabit broadband to business corridors, is going to be a game changer from an attraction standpoint and or a retention standpoint. Can you scroll down again, it has a trip not taken has a direct effect on achieving sustainability. And there's one more, and then, can it enhance safety? Absolutely. I think, most of our public safety entities are relying more and more on technology, both at point of service where they're located, but in their cars and whatnot. And so having a web of connectivity throughout any area in the region is going to be important from a safety perspective. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware that is definitely an umbrella item that covers all 6 of these.
Excellent. Thank you, council member. Appreciate it. We have a couple more comments coming in the chat. One from David for the equity goal. Focus on affordable transit oriented communities. This may also be, we can also maybe put that under supporting economic vitality as well too. So thank you for that input. And then Carrie Cartwright, you had a question, a clarifying question about what Caltrans Metro projects are currently in development, regardless of phase. So go ahead.
So Carrie, to your point, actually, as Jim indicated earlier, we're compiling a pretty expansive list of projects within the larger study area that includes Caltrans projects, Metro projects. I would have to ask maybe Sarah to give you a rough idea of the number, but right now it's a pretty big list. So I'm not going to at this time riddle it off, but we can provide some information on the list, and certainly you'll be seeing the projects that are captured there. We would lose all the time we have today.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I just have another follow-up question. And what, because a big project will influence the most, but in the analysis can be done, and some of the suggestions is the Green Line extension to South Bay. Where is that at right now?
In the environmental phase.
Okay, when you guys expect to release a draft EIR, EIS?
You know that Mark Dierking is with us. Maybe he can provide some insights. He's leading that project.
Sure, the draft is supposed to be released in the spring of next year.
Okay.
Excellent. Before I get to your question, Dave, or your comment, David, I just want to review the enhancing equity criteria real quick, just to make sure we can maybe get a couple of points on this one. Sorry, if you can scroll back down real quick. So the criteria for this category that's required is reducing the number of and rates of fatalities and non-serious injuries, and then reducing non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So, and then we're also wanting to incorporate as a criteria, including active transportation safety components, crosswalks, refuge islands. So gonna put that there for people to simmer on. And David, go ahead and provide your comment.
Sure. It kind of fits in with that one. Our South Bay is working on a local travel network, which aims to create a safe route for local use vehicles, which are micro mobility up to like golf carts. And the whole point is to connect neighborhoods with destinations, which I think helps with the economic vitality, that sort of stuff. But most of these are also, almost all of them probably, are electric vehicles. So it's achieving sustainability. The South Bay COG has an integrated land use and housing strategy, a neighborhood-oriented development, which is kind of bringing destinations to the neighborhood. Riviera Village in Redondo Beach is a pretty good example where you have a really high concentration of a variety of businesses that really just fosters walking and active transportation use from the neighborhood. And so you kind of reduce the need for trips by bringing the destinations closer to people. And that's done through like technology and that sort of stuff. And so a comment that I kind of have or question is, there seems to be a line where innovation kind of crosses into, I don't know, fantasy for some agencies, where it's just a little bit outside of the box where you kind of get told no. We've kind of run into that before. And so a comment I have or something is or question is, how do we make sure that that innovation in our world is seen as innovative in the CTC's world, but we're also allowed to kind of think outside the box. So I don't want a fancier road improvement. It's something that is different, but achieves the same kind of goals. And so I feel like we kind of have to, at least in our experience, walk a fine line of keeping our foot in the traditional world, but also expanding it ever so slightly. And the fiber network, I think, is a great example, is that it's got all of these transportation benefits that we had to fight and scream to get approval for. And it seems like it's just a little odd that we have this fight constantly. And it just seems like a bigger fight when we try and expand innovation at the Caltrans or state level. And so just a comment, I don't know exactly how it fits in, but yeah.
Great, that is great feedback. I'm sure Zoe and Jim are going to take that back and consider, where it fits in, whether it's with the goals or criteria, and see how to apply that. I think that's some great feedback. So if you want to add anything, but yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say to David's point, I think that's a legitimate challenge you bring up. And I think the opportunity with this plan and even this criteria we're laying out in the goals, I think our success at being able to do that is really being able to demonstrate the benefits across all of these with those kind of innovative tools to sort of bring people on board. SCCP and the state, everyone's kind of looking at all these multiple objectives. How can you get the most bang for your buck out of a project that is, addressing equity, sustainability, reducing VMT? That's a lot to ask of a single project. So I think to the extent that we're really successful at putting that narrative forward, we can really work toward that end to bring folks along.
So toward that, I think there's an opportunity for, last time we turned in a list of projects, which we did from the bottom up, was I think for the short range transit plan. And it was only a couple of months ago. What we didn't do was focus on which of those projects are eligible and therefore which kinds of projects are not. It might be worthwhile for you guys to take a look at that list and pick off the ones that aren't eligible, in your opinion. That way we can better focus on how we need to broaden the eligibility criteria. If there's something that we think strongly is or should be eligible, then it would be hard in our list of hundreds of projects to find it. But if you have a list of projects that from that list that you think are eligible for SB1, that'll help us focus on what isn't. And that way we can get into the criteria more focused.
Thank you, Steve. I do want to let you guys know we do have only about 13 minutes left and we still have a little bit more to present on. So we're going to actually move on back to the presentation really quick. David, if you want to put your comment in the chat, we'd appreciate that so that we can get that in our record as well too. But I'm going to pass it back over to Jim, who's going to go over the goal evaluation process. Go ahead, Jim.
Yep, great. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, everyone who's participated so far. This is hugely helpful feedback for us, where you're seeing some notes on the Miro board, and we're taking furious notes offline as well. So thank you for all that. So once we have this criteria locked in, and I think the input you provided so far has been, like I said, hugely valuable. We're going to use a Harvey ball approach. This is something that a lot of you are familiar with, to evaluate each project or program on its ability to support each goal, right? So this is what I typically call a qualitative assessment informed by quantitative data. We obviously have access to both the SCAG and Metro travel demand models, which we'll use to obtain quantitative information of changes in vehicle miles traveled and delay, person and vehicle delay, travel times, ridership changes, et cetera. But as you know, there aren't models and quantitative data for every project and for every goal. Improvements related to safety or economic development or climate resiliency or land use and others, all of those are evaluated qualitatively and informed by our findings, our analysis, our discussions with stakeholders like this. So this approach is entirely consistent with CTC guidelines. We've applied it successfully in several CMCPs that we've recently led for the 105, for a series of corridors in the Inland Empire, Ventura County on the 101, and a few other places. So we'll go through project by project. Each project will receive a single score for each goal, guided by the guidance you see on the screen here. Again, I want to be clear that the evaluation is not intended to serve as a prioritization, but really is a preliminary screening process to identify projects and programs that have the potential to address our collective goals. And if we go to the next slide, I always find it easier to and more helpful to explain how this scoring will work in practice, right? So we came up with some fictional projects that actually touch on some stuff that was already discussed today, just to show you how different project elements might change the scores across each of these goal areas. So the first project is a basic recreational bike lane along the LA River. As you can see, it scores kind of minimally across the most of the goals, maybe with the exception of sustainability. If we take that bike lane and we turn it into an on-street lane that connects to an equity focused community and includes some other project elements like storage facilities and intersection upgrades, you can see it scores slightly better across many of the goal areas. If we go one step further and make this a fully protected bike lane, connects to multiple EFCs, connects to multiple employers, includes elements like heat island improvements and shade and shelter, you can see it scores pretty well across areas. So, at the very beginning, Steve was saying, well, it's helpful to think about what types of projects might be more competitive than others. So this is a way to kind of get after that, and really by adding additional elements or changing the characterization of those elements might make some projects kind of bubble up to the top and score better than others. So let me stop here and just see if that makes sense, and if this, at least at first blush, does a decent enough job accounting for differences in impacts and benefits across projects of the same type.
Jim, can I make a comment?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
So what I find interesting, right, is that what you're calling a recreational bikeway along the LA River, which is something that that we have discussed here in the South Bay, right? It scores the lowest, but I want you to look at it through a different lens, right? If you look at the pathway of the LA River, it kind of mirrors to a slight degree the pathway of the 405 and then down the 110, right? And so when you think about connectivity from a multimodal perspective, right, where you're getting people off bikes that have no intersections involved, right? It's a protected lane because, so, right, when you get down to number 3 here, you're saying fully protected cycle track. Well, that would be a fully protected cycle track. That would be seamless, right? So people, and then if it connects to arterials where people can get off to address businesses and so to me, number 1 should rate in this, example as high as number 3 because they kind of coordinate together and it allows people to travel longer distances in an easier fashion. So just, to David's point of thinking outside the box, that is a project there that would really create connection that does not require cars.
Yeah. No, fair enough. No, absolutely. Fair enough. Yep. Great. So that's helpful. I do want to be sensitive to time, and I do appreciate everyone's time that you spent with us today. I do have a couple more slides I want to go to, really kind of informational as we begin to close this out. And if you've got other comments, absolutely put them in the chat, and we'll be recording all these. So again, once our final step here is to group projects into improvement scenarios or tiers based on a couple different elements that you see here. One is shovel worthiness, and we're just asking the question or answering the question, what is the contribution of this project to our shared goals? That'll be essentially the results of the Harvey ball analysis we just walked through. We'll combine that on the right-hand side with an assessment of shovel readiness, which essentially evaluates how ready an individual project is for implementation. So there we'll look at things like, is it in an existing plan or program? Is it funded? Is there match identified? How far along is it in the environmental process? Are the stakeholders supportive? So all of these elements, which we sometimes refer to as deliverability criteria, are specifically called out in discretionary grant programs, including state programs, SCCP, and the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, federal programs like RAISE and BUILD, and many others. So that's the reason we're really providing and describing them here. So if we go to the next slide, the last stage in the process is to really plot projects on essentially a 2x2 matrix that we've got shown here, and maybe it might be able to blow it up just a little bit so people can see it. So the vertical axis plots project benefits composite from the Harvey ball analysis, from low to high, going from down to up. And the horizontal axis shows the shovel readiness, again, low to high, left to right. So, we have 4 quadrants. The top right corner, tier 1, these are projects with high benefits that are ready or close to ready for implementation. So this is the pool of candidates for grant funding that we'll pull from. Clearly, not all projects from this tier will move forward into grant funding, but all the grant applications will come from this tier, right? So top right is kind of where you want to be. Top left, tier 2A look like strong projects. Maybe they're not quite ready for implementation. Maybe they need funding. Maybe they're not far enough along in the environmental process. Maybe they need stakeholder review, but they look, they look promising and possibly longer term projects. Tier 2B in the bottom right, these are projects that might need mitigation or modification to move forward. Maybe they score well in some goal areas and not others. Maybe they need a shade or shade trees or bike boxes or something to really hit on some of the criteria that we just talked about. And then bottom left corner, tier 3, projects here shown have low benefits. Maybe they're not ready for implementation. Maybe they haven't been fully defined. Maybe they're extremely long-term. And so those are kind of not ready for prime time projects. So that's how we're going to kind of go to the investment scenarios, and then from there we can slice the data in the projects in any number of ways. We can summarize projects by geographic segment. These are segments of the 405 corridor, by time frame, short, medium, long, by function, by goal area. So lots of different ways. Once we have the projects plotted correctly, we can summarize them in all sorts of different through all sorts of different lenses. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Michael to close us out and still get you out of here on time. Again, really appreciate your feedback. And Michael, why don't you take it from here?
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you. Go back one slide. So, we have covered a lot here, and I think we've got some tremendous input and feedback, and to chat and in person. And I do want to also provide a message to people who will be watching this online after the fact. We will be taking more comments and some more feedback from you on this presentation, this input, and I'll be introducing Shelley Kwan to you with her contact information for you to be able to provide that in the coming weeks. But definitely thank everyone here very much. We want to make sure that this framework that we provided to you is aligned with with the goals of the subregion, and how do we make sure that we elevate and articulate the value of your projects within this framework, and to help make sure that there's a cohesive narrative how these are linked together and how they do improve mobility and equity and sustainability and all these goals in the South Bay cities, linking into the entire 405 corridor. So we have some more work to do. Obviously, this is the first conversation. It's a great conversation. We want to have more outreach with community and regional stakeholders within the study area. Oftentimes when we do planning efforts, we do talk to a lot of government agencies and local jurisdictions, and that's incredibly helpful given your representation of your communities. But we are at Metro also expanding our outreach to community-based organizations, advocacy groups, public health groups, people who have expertise in other areas that are going to be helpful to us to paint the entire picture of how we're linking these projects and these benefits to communities and people in the corridor that do need to have the disparities reduced and need more access to opportunities. So one of the questions we're going to ask you at the bottom of the screen here is, who are the other key stakeholders, the community groups, the CBOs? Like, who do you work with and talk to? Maybe some of the transit folks as well that have some ideas on that in terms of the communities they serve. What are the key stakeholder groups in the community for the South Bay that we really need to talk to and have included to make sure that this presentation of priorities and input from the South Bay region is inclusive of all that, so that we can work together to advance these projects as a team. We're going to evaluate the projects and programs for further discussion. And I think we just want to make sure, and you can send us input by email since we're running short on time today, or contact us, but we want to make sure that this presentation, this plan, really has a good sense of what are the mobility and equity and these other issues that are caused by congestion within the I-405 corridor. I think we heard a lot of it today, but we know people think of things or maybe want to articulate it in writing. So please feel free to reach out to us. And let's go to the next slide here. I'm going to introduce Shelley Kwan, and Shelley's going to be helping us out, and she's done a great job with us on a lot of programs. She understands state funding and guidelines, and she's helped us with ATP projects. And so you know, she's a very experienced person on our team. We're very happy to have her with us, and she's going to be taking point on this project for the coming months while Zoe is celebrating her family. So Shelley, bring you in here now.
All right, thanks, Michael. I guess today I'll just walk you through the project schedule and wrap up. As mentioned, we're still early in the process, so we definitely have time to work through all of what we've heard today, and we'll continue to hear from you. Between now and the fall, we'll continue working with stakeholders and carrying out evaluation of projects and programs and developing the ultimate improvement scenarios. And this will lead to the release of a draft plan by spring of next year, which we hope will be adopted by the board by summer of 2022 to put us in a position for applying for cycle 3 of the Solutions for Congested Corridors Program and future funding opportunities. Of course, public participation will be ongoing throughout this effort. That said, next slide, please. Let's stay connected. Please feel free to contact us with thoughts about outreach, the content we covered today, additional input or questions, and definitely feel free to make generous use of the email address on the slide. And with all of that said, we thank you so much for your time today and look forward to continuing to work together to bring solutions to the I-405 corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, did you have any final comment as we head off? I appreciate your leadership with the COG and you and the staff and Jackie and everyone and Mike, you know, helping us link to your constituents and your jurisdictions and your stakeholders in the South Bay.
Sure. Just if you have comments that you're sending to Metro, please CC us, CC David, because we want to follow up on your concerns. If there's some policy issues that need to be addressed that haven't been addressed yet, we can always talk about it at the IWG, or we can actually take policy positions to the COG board if they're that significant. So let us know if there are things you'd like to have changed that haven't been addressed so far. Sorry, Michael.
That's all good. It's all good. Thank you. Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, and just a reminder, we did put in the chat our project email address. So if you do have additional ideas, we definitely welcome them. So please feel free to email us following today's meeting with your input. A lot of great insights today. Thank you so much. And keep a lookout because we want to make sure that you guys are our partners throughout the process. So keep a lookout for our public survey. We want to get that out to your constituents, as well as when we release the draft plan. So there's going to be opportunities for the greater public to get involved, and we want you guys to be a partner with us in helping us get feedback on those items when they do get released. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you on behalf of the Metro team and the Cambridge and Ariano and everyone working on this. We definitely appreciate this and your generosity, and hopefully have more discussions in the future. I'm sure you'll find us and Steve and bring us to the table as often as you can. So thank you very much.
Thank you for doing this, Metro. It was very helpful.
A pleasure. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Have a great day.